Hi, this is the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Markets, finance, and scandals. Yeah, we've been reporting on the huge frauds that have been taking place on Wall Street, specifically the big banks on Wall Street, your Goldmans, your JP Morgans, etc. And we're talking about the global insurrection against banking occupation because the people of Iceland have discovered that their economy was completely destroyed by bankers on Wall Street. Remember, Lehman Brothers collapsing led to Icelandic economy collapsing. Therefore, Dick Fuld, who was responsible for the Lehman mass fraud accounting, is responsible in part for the Icelandic economy collapsing. And now what's happening in Greece? Oh, the same thing. The same Wall Street fraudulent bankers are doing the same evil doing things to the banking system, resulting in now Greece collapsing. Let's bring in Stacy Herbert to get the latest.
Max, hi. Good to be here. Well, you brought up the Lehman collapse, which happened during the height of the financial collapse, when everything was falling apart very fast. And all the mainstream media was describing it as like the Great Depression. Not since the Great Depression had we seen such a crash. Now we're moving into those very early, dangerous times of the early 30s. And I'll show you that in my headlines I have here.
Yeah.
Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize winner who threatens the world. This is a editorial by Jeremy Warner, and he says Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, has taken to advocating a 25% surcharge on goods from China as a way to bring the Chinese leadership into line and force them to revalue their currency. Jeremy Warner says, quote, what he's advocating is trade retaliation so extreme that it would make the 1930s look like a stroll in the park. And now this, of course, is referring to the Smoot-Hawley trade tariffs, which were brought in the 1930s. And those were the second highest trade tariffs ever introduced into the United States. And as soon as the U.S. slapped these tariffs on imported goods, all their trade partners retaliated with tariffs on U.S. goods. So the U.S. economy went into free fall from that point in the 1930s, and imports and exports declined by over 60%. Once we start slapping on trade tariffs, this could be the next phase of the Great Global Depression.
Well, let me explain something about Paul Krugman. He basically is over there at the New York Times. The New York Times, obviously, is in New York City. And, of course, they support anything that comes out of Wall Street because so much of the economy in New York City is dependent on the Wall Street fraud and the perpetuation of the Ponzi schemes that come out of Wall Street. So Krugman is basically advocating a continuation of the fraudulent accounting and market manipulation, the fiat currency regime that has made this crisis as severe as it is. He's become an apologist for fractional reserve fiat currency banking terrorism. Meanwhile, over at the other side of town, Stephen Roach, who's an honest economist, has slammed Krugman, saying he should be hit with a baseball bat. Of course, we would never advocate anything like this, but this is what Stephen Roach said.
He did use that phrase.
He said he should be slammed with a baseball bat. So Stephen Roach, of course, is in Asia, where the perspective is a little bit more global and not regional. Krugman is basically just a regional, local economist doing the bidding of the Wall Street crowd.
Interestingly, Krugman also uses the this time it's different argument. Now, you see this time it's different argument often used during a bubble where people find some reason to invest in houses or tulips or the South Sea. That it's some reason that this time is different and it will continue to grow by 20, 30, 40, 50% a year. This time, Krugman says, look, I know that many economists have a visceral dislike for this kind of confrontational policy. But you have to bear in mind that the really outlandish actor here is China. Never before in history has a nation followed this drastic mercantilist policy. So he's saying this time it's different. Normally I wouldn't advocate this sort of trade tariffs, but this time it's different.
Well, look, the U.S. at some point is going to have to start raising interest rates to defend the dollar, and this is going to decimate anybody who's on the fringe, including those 30 million new people who now have to buy health insurance as mandated by this so-called Obamacare, which just basically hands the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industry 30 million new customers. It's government-sanctioned profiteering. It's absolutely unconscionable.
Well, you bring up Obama, and he's in my next headline, which harkens back to the early 30s. Obama pays more than Buffett as U.S. risks AAA rating. The bond market is saying, apparently, that it's safer to lend to Warren Buffett than Barack Obama. 2-year notes sold by the billionaire's Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated in February yield 3.5 basis points less than treasuries of similar maturity. This is apparently just an exceedingly rare event.
Well, not going forward. It's going to be the new normal. Let me explain something. In America, the corporations, because they run the show, and because their orientation is short-term profit. I mean, even Warren Buffett's orientation is as compared to a government, it still has to be considered short-termism. So long-term values that should be institutionalized by a democratic so-called economy like the U.S. should trump short-term profit motives. But what we're seeing is that the short-term profit motive is trumping long-term values in the U.S. So the U.S. is no longer a country that respects long-term institutional values. It's increasingly catering to the short-termism of casino gulag capitalism in America, which is what we're seeing emerge.
Moody's points out that the U.S. will spend more on debt service as a percentage of revenues this year than any other top-rated economy except the U.K. So America will use about 7% of taxes for debt payments in 2010 and almost 11% in 2013. And Moody's points out that those economies have been caught in a crisis while they are highly leveraged. And of course, this brings us back to Keynes, because everybody's following Keynesian policies of government stepping in to spend when consumers can't. But the other thing that everybody who is a Keynesian forgets is that Keynes actually argued that during the plush times when things are good, government should save a lot. And they obviously didn't do that.
No, I mean, you can't have capitalism without capital. And you can't have capital without savings, and you can't have savings without decent wages. So again, Krugman is showing his colors as somebody who is in the pocket of Wall Street to postulate and to propagate his Keynesian view of things, which has nothing to do with long-term values, only in the service of short-term profits. And this is why the U.S. economy is collapsing as it is.
Well, you mentioned the casino gulag state, and I have two headlines, quick headlines that go with that. Number in extreme debt doubles in 2 years. So this is a headline from the United Kingdom. A person has extreme debt in the UK if their debt-to-income ratio is greater than 66 to 1. And this number of people in this extreme debt in the UK has doubled in the past 2 years. It's now at 8,000 men and women. So, for example, they give that if this person earns £10,000 a year, they owe £660,000.
Well, this is the casino gulag model in operation. In other words, as long as you have people in extreme debt, the government will never raise interest rates. And they will allow people to keep accumulating greater amounts of debt. And at some point, the total sum production in the UK will be basically citizens speculating not to make money to save, but to get more coupons and credits to continue to speculate. So they're just basically welded into kind of a sick reality game show at this point, where there is no ability to save and be independently wealthy. Your only thing available to the people in the UK now is to be kind of a hamster on a wheel trying to speculate on a minute-by-minute basis for just more pellets that'll give you the opportunity to speculate more. So society itself in the UK, and in the U.S., the society, the average citizen now has become kind of a shadow of their former self, just going back 10 or 20 years ago.
Well, not this woman in my next headline. Woman aims to become world's fattest. So she's hardly a shadow of her former.
She casts a large shadow over a large population.
This is an American woman, and she says, I'd love to be 1,000 pounds. It might be hard, though, because running after my daughter keeps my weight down. So this woman, who needs a mobility scooter to go shopping and eats huge amounts of junk food each week to try to gain weight. So she now needs to eat 12,000 calories per day, which is 6 times the recommended daily intake for any woman. And she has to eat, in order to keep this weight on, she needs to eat $815 worth of food. But of course, she's on a scooter, so she can't really have a normal job. So what she does to earn money is she started running a website where men pay to watch her consume food, which is part of this consumer gulag model that you described.
Right. The economy is catering to the lowest, basest, most prurient aspects of society. So instead of having a long-term value society that has institutions like, let's say, the church or the government or education, which inculcate long-term values, because the speculators run the economy, you've got people like this who are looking for somebody to log on, give her $5 to watch her eat a whole, dozen cherry pies so that she can then go out and eat a dozen cherry pies in terms of keeping the short-termism. It's a form of psychosis, government-enabled psychosis.
But it also brings me back to the Great Depression days when you had the Ringham, Barnum, and Bailey circus traveling around America. And, of course, during that time, it was Depression-era times, and it was difficult to earn money unless you were a super freak. And then people would pay 10 cents to come see you, if you had 3 heads or.
Well, remember Sidney Pollack's film, They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Which is about Depression-era America dance-a-thoning themselves to death for a sandwich.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what a depression looks like. And Obamacare is just going down the slippery slope toward a greater depression.
And my final headline, because this brings it all back together to the Great Depression, because the Great Depression, many say, ended in Europe during World War II. Angela Merkel, EU summit should not discuss bailout for Greece. So this is the big story. The European leaders are meeting today to discuss the European Union, but the biggest topic, of course, is Greece. Now, there's that game of chicken that we talked about between whether or not Greece is going to the IMF or is Germany going to back a bailout. Now, Thilo Sarrazin from the Bundesbank this weekend said that if Greece cannot pay its bills, it, quote, should do what every debtor has to do and file for insolvency. This would be a suitably frightening example for every other potentially unsound state. Now, to put into context, if Greece defaults, if they go bankrupt, this would be twice the size of the combined defaults of Argentina and Russia.
Now, Stacy Herbert, you've been an observer of this split in Europe, as the states like Germany is really basically splitting from the rest of the EU at this point, because they're saying, oh, it was great during the growth phase that we had this common currency. But you brought up something earlier, which I think is very interesting. The cost for German reunification was high, and part of the creation of the euro at that time was to try to neuter the effect of a reunified Germany. Speak on this a little bit.
What you're seeing right now emerge in the European Monetary Union is that basically it's come down to Germany will have to underwrite much of the Club Med countries. Now, Germany has just spent over $1 trillion in the cost of reunification, of bringing East Germany up to West German standards. And part of the reason that Ambrose Evans Pritchard gives for why the Germans were forced to give up their Deutschmark was that France was afraid of a very strong Germany. I remember this has emerged from, I believe it was Gorbachev's records, that Margaret Thatcher and France tried to stop the reunification of Germany. Many people think that this was the beginning of this whole bull market, this euphoria we've had, is that the end of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And in fact, the US, UK, and France tried to stop that.
So the Teutonic genie could be out of the bottle, so to speak. Anyway, we've got to cut it off right there, and we're going to talk with a friend of ours down in Athens after the break, talking about the Greek crisis, so don't go away.
The close-up team has been to the region where the best Russian flax is produced. Now, RT goes to southwestern Siberia, the region with the world's largest coal deposits, where the harsh climate shapes the people's lifestyle, and where the best Russian ski resort is located. Welcome to the Kemerovo region. Russia Close-Up on RT.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. All righty, let's go to Helen Skopas, the wildly popular radio host on Athens International Radio. Welcome to the Keiser Report, Helen.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right. Helen Scopus, everyone has been seeing the images of nationwide protests and strikes in Greece, and Greece is the big topic at the EU summit. Tell us what is happening in Greece.
Well, the people in Greece are angry. They feel betrayed. They feel as if they shouldn't have to pay for a system that has failed on a worldwide level. They feel as if they shouldn't have to pay for their government's inability to rein in spending. They understand that there's need for change, and they're willing to contribute towards this change. But I really think that they're in shock also because this is really unexpected. It happened overnight. They were not aware of the critical financial situation the country is in.
Right, but it's well documented now that the government had help back in 2000 in hiding debts as they entered the Eurozone, and that help came from Wall Street. And yet the Wall Street banks are allowed to continue operating in Greece. How come they're not being drawn and quartered or hung or stuffed, burned in effigy or something? Why are they letting these guys continue?
Well, the people in Greece are demanding that the money that has been taken from the government coffers be returned, and they do want the people who are responsible for this financial situation to go behind bars. But you do have to understand that this government is new, and they've only been in office for since October, and I think that people are giving them a little bit of time, just a little bit of leeway to see how and if they are going to address this issue. Now, don't forget that the main focus right now for the people in Greece is the money that has to be borrowed by the end of May. The Greek government has to find 16 billion euros. It has to borrow that much money in order to be able to cover its obligations. And what the Greek Prime Minister has asked the European Union to do is to back it politically so that it can borrow on lower interest rates.
Right. Well, the government is new, but they weren't born yesterday. I mean, this is from a long established political family in Greece. Certainly they know how banks work. I would hate to think that the leadership in Greece it just right now took an economics 101 course and can figure out that if you steal money from people, it ends up disenfranchising those people. At what point did the people just say, look, enough is enough. We're tired of the lies. We're tired of the deceit. We're tired of the larceny. We're tired of the Goldmans and the JP Morgans. We want a regime change. When is this going to happen?
People are tired of all the things you've mentioned, and they are right now, I think they are frightened, and like I said, they're shocked. I think they're going to wait and see what's going to happen this week at the EU summit. Let's see if the Eurozone is going to come through for Greece.
Is anyone in Greece communicating anything honestly to the public aside from yourself? I mean, is the entire government just outright corrupt A to Z? They're just worthless?
They do have access to information, Max. As a matter of fact, I think that the Greek people have realized what the citizens of this world should realize also, that we are responsible partly for this situation. We borrow money that we can't pay back. We have to reassess our priorities and stop becoming slaves to money.
Yeah, but wait a minute. That's a ridiculous defense. It's because, I mean, the people who are lending this money, the banks, they don't have to pay any of the money back. They get bailed out by the governments. The people of Greece austerity measures are being forced on them to bail out the bankers who loan money. They're not paying any penalties. Why the asymmetry? Why do the workers and the savers have to bear the brunt of bad bets made by Wall Street? That these people are being, this is a defense used by rapists, saying that, oh, you know what, this woman wanted to be raped, that's why she's innocent. This is the defense being put forward, that the people of Greece wanted to be financially terrorized in this way?
No, the people of Greece did not want to be financially terrorized, and they are in the streets. As a matter of fact, we have another strike. This is the third strike in 1 month. There are strikes going on almost every day in different areas, in different professions. The people are out there. They are protesting.
All right, let's move on to this face-off between Greece and Germany. Germany is going to stand behind Greece, or will Greece have to go to the IMF?
The feeling here is that Germany will not stand behind Greece. And the best case scenario is that the EU will offer a joint, let's say, package with the IMF for support to Greece. This is what people have been led to believe, that this might be the solution. They are afraid, though, that even though they don't really know what this means, why they shouldn't want to go to the IMF, but they think that that's the way things are going to turn out. They'll probably have to go to the IMF, to the International Monetary Fund.
Well, I mean, the IMF, the history of the IMF is in league with Wall Street bankers imposing austerity measures on behalf of mainly Wall Street banks. It's an extension of the U.S. banking system, as is the World Bank. So for any Greeks who are watching this, understand that to get in bed with the IMF is to throw gasoline onto the fire of these austerity measures. Look at Argentina. Look at throughout the entire recent history of bailout packages that the IMF have been involved with. The results have been catastrophic for the people, fantastic for the bankers, though. And again, Germany knows this as well as anybody, and the fact that Germany is turning their back on a fellow European country is kind of a shame, really, because this European project seems like it's coming apart at the seams, and the hope that Germany could be contained back when the euro was created. Remember the idea of putting East and West Germany together that Teutonic genie could come out of the bottle once again and stock Europe. But it looks like the genie is out because they're not going to help anybody in Europe. They're only helping themselves. Is the people in Greece, is there any animosity toward the Germans at this point?
They feel they're angry. They're angry. They feel as if the whole world is kind of against them. They haven't realized that the people of the world are on their side, just like they're on the side of the people in Iceland. They feel as if they're being attacked. They're being accused of being people who don't want to work. They're lazy. They don't pay their taxes. They're waiting for a free ride on a Euro ticket. This is what they're getting.
Okay, well, if it's clear that the people of Greece are being victimized similarly to the way that the people of Iceland are being victimized, why can't there be a new global organization to compete with the IMF made up of the disenfranchised peoples and countries of the world? Why not Greece? You're in the media business in Greece. Why can't there reach out to Iceland and say, let's start creating a new global institution of these countries that are getting victimized by banking terrorists? Why can't we create a new global organization to compete with the IMF? Why do we have to throw our league? Why do we just have to sit back and take it? Why can't we reach out to these other countries? What stops you from reaching out to Iceland to create some kind of new pact?
Nothing is stopping the Greek people to do that, and that could be a possibility in the very near future.
Well, I mean, it's only getting worse. The various other European countries are being subjected to this kind of problem, and certainly there's a need for this type of organization to exist.
I think the people in Greece, and not only in Greece, but in the world, have realized that they do have a right to a decent life. They do have a right to having a pension that they can live on after contributing 35, 37 years of their money to these pension security funds. They do have a right to health care. They do have a right to education. They do have a right to a dignified life.
Right, but if the government's in league with the bankers, that right's being taken away.
Well, this is something they're going to have to realize.
Well, they should realize it today because this is happening right now.
They should have realized it yesterday, maybe, before it happened. But the thing is, this is what I'm saying, that we all have to assume our responsibilities for our choices and our actions.
Well, there's a poll online, I noticed, that is trying to make me the president of Greece.
Yes.
I think 1,000 people have voted yes to this. So is there any chance I could become the president of Greece?
Well, why don't we start a People's Party?
Well, I think, yes, of course. What is the history of alternative political parties in Greece? Has there been much success?
No, not much. It's usually been a two-party system, up to now at least.
But a third party, certainly within the Constitution, it's possible for a third party to emerge?
Well, there are more than two parties in Parliament, but usually it's the two major parties that win the elections. Yes, I think there's room in the Constitution. I'm not an expert on this, but we can investigate it.
Okay, so you have a multi-party system currently. It's just that it's been dominated by this duopoly, as it were. Let's move on to a question that came in from a viewer, EB. He asks, if the Greeks were given a chance to exit the euro, would the Greek people support it, and would it mean a return to the drachma?
Well, let me point out that the drachma has been a part of Greek culture for thousands of years. I think opinion is divided on this. There are those who believe that Greece should have its own national currency in order for the country to be autonomous, whereas there are others who believe that Greece should be a part of the European Union, and they feel better off working as a team in an alliance, being part of a team, being part of an alliance. Now, I remember back when Greece first became a member of the EEC, the European Economic Community, that's what it was called then, the Greeks had a sigh of relief because they wouldn't have to worry about the threat of Turkey. Now, Turkish F-16s invade Greek airspace on a daily basis, regularly. And if you look at the Greek borders, European Union borders, I mean, Greece spends 4.5% on defense.
Right. Well, the borders don't seem to matter much in this new world. There's reports of the Mexican army invading, flying flights, helicopter flights over the border in Texas. So it doesn't. In other words, money rules, and that's about it. Now we're coming up on. Let me ask you something about next winter when it's very, very cold in Berlin, and a lot of German people are going to seek some sun in Greece. Are you going to let them come down and use your beaches, or are you going to rightfully stop them at the border and force them back to freezing Berlin?
Oh, it's a free country.
All right, well, that's going to do it. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report, Helen Skopas.
Thank you, Max. All
right, I want to thank my guests, Helen Skopas and Stacy Herbert, of course. And if you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.